While we're waiting on those to dry, let's go ahead and talk about the actual plan for painting the models and what our specific plans are for this project. So I've outlined some notes for what I intend to do with this project and the actual painting steps. It's important to have a plan in place before you start painting, specifically on a project like this where time is so valuable and you don't want to waste any of it. You should have some steps outlined. Now, with the first time you're going to do a specific squad or model or color scheme, you're not entirely for sure exactly what it is. You're probably not comfortable about it. So really you should do a test model. But you need to have a plan in place before you even do the test model. So what I've done here is I've sort of compiled some notes. So I have a game plan in my mind. Now I'm not going to go into all of it, but it's important to see that this plan for even a simple color scheme, which is just cream and washes and browns and some grays and some whites, even this simple color scheme really has, give or take, about 20 steps to it. And that's because you have to include priming, base coloring, then you have to think about things like layering, dry brushing, over brushing, a little blending, not much, washing, dips, flocking, basing, all of that sort of stuff. And by the time you apply all of that to the different parts of the model, in some cases 2 or 3 layers for each part of the model, you start to see how the steps can add up. So it's important to have sort of a guideline in place, which is exactly what I've created for myself. So that way I know that as I go through the model, this is the step I'm at, this is what I need to be worrying about. Sometimes with really complicated models, I even keep a little notepad setting beside it so I can remember, oh, I have to be sure to dot the I's, or oh, I need to be sure to highlight that, or oh, don't forget to do this. So that way you have a plan in place for it. So after the priming, tomorrow when those are fully dry, it's a little too dark tonight, we'll go ahead and apply the base coat, give that about an hour to dry so make sure it's nice and even on there. And then we'll start to actually apply the paint to the models in 30-minute increments for the next week, and an hour on the weekends. Okay, so that's about it for now. So let's go see how that primer looks. Okay, it's been 15 minutes. As you can see, light is already falling very, very fast here. It's getting dark quick, which means the temperature's dropping. So it's important that I go ahead and get these guys finished up as quick as I can. With the Space Marines, I should be able to just apply the simple lower level to it, lower layer of paint, put them on their backs and sort of score underneath of them. And with these guys on the side here, I'm just going to flip them over. So let's see how we're doing. Okay, now it's a little dark, so I apologize that I'm priming black. As you can see, the Land Raider needs a lot of paint, so I'm going to flip that over completely. Now I'm going to take a second to make sure that I don't have anything on the top that's going to be damaged to your antenna or that sort of thing. Looks okay. I think I'll be all right there. These guys, as you can see, they're pretty well covered. That GW paint really does an excellent job, so I really don't have to worry too much about that, but I want to be sure I get all those little areas. There's really not much to get. It looks like I got it pretty well. This guy's a little bit better, for example. That cloak under there is hard to get under there. So I'm just going to flip these guys over. Get on a little squirt of paint on the bottom side, and that should be all she wrote for that. There we go. They're kind of rolling around a little bit. He needs it on the back. And then for these guys over here, if you can see. As you can see there, this guy completely is on the back, needs all that. Flip these guys around. These guys are pretty small, so hopefully when I prime them, some of the paint, because it's a cloud, will actually wrap around, disperse a little bit. Let's do the Marines first. Okay. Oop. Now we probably won't get another chance at this before it gets dark, so. Shake. That's about it. Make sure. I'm going to do a little touch up here on the Land Raider. Just on the front here. And that's some of the weapons. Okay, and that's really all we need. Let's see these guys over here. And that's about it. Okay. Those guys will dry before it gets too cold out. We'll bring them inside in just a few minutes once they've had a chance to air out a little bit, and then we will be able to start painting those tomorrow. So I'll see you for painting. You also want to select a couple painting rags to have on hand. You can use these to wipe your fingers and to wipe the bristles of the brushes as you move along. A lot of times I'll reuse the same brushes during a project because I get a fondness for them. So because of that, I oftentimes need to wipe off the bristles between usings just to make sure that I get all the excess paint off. Now, be sure to be careful when you do this. You don't want to wipe the bristles too hard because those bristles will come out if you drag them hard enough, and those brushes are expensive, so try to keep them nice and cheap. I also selected a couple additional paints for this particular project for their cheap nature. These are a couple of paints you can get in most of your basic hobby stores or places like Walmart or Target or other sundry stores. You can pick these up for about $1 or so. They're large because the paints aren't very nice actually, but they're great for base work. I wouldn't recommend using these on a basic miniature unless you thin them down quite a bit. They don't have the same basic coverage as a GW paint or a Reaper paint. They don't go on smoothly, and you oftentimes see a lot of brush lines left behind if you don't do it carefully. But for something like base work or bulk work, for example making terrain, these are great. Both of these have sort of a cold blue ethereal feel that I really like, and I'm thinking I'm going to use these on the bases and then use the ice blue as a complementary color on top of that. So I've went ahead and grabbed those, and I'm going to set those to the back to remind me. I've also selected some hobby scenic material for this. This is from Gale Force 9, and it's sort of a tundra color. They call it winter dead grass. I like it because I can apply this to the grass without having as a static grass, and it'll stay in the nice color scheme I want, but it may give me sort of a tundra feel, which I'm sort of going for with this particular project. The name of the game with this project is speed. Really, we're trying to get this project painted quickly, so we're not going to be making these models quite as nice as we normally would. For example, your unit's not going to be what you might consider a beautiful miniature to display for all your friends, and it's not going to be something you're going to win without a painting competition. But it is going to be a very, very good standard basic paint scheme. It's going to certainly be tabletop worthy. It will certainly be acceptable at any tournament. Any officially GW sanctioned tournament, it really is a 3-color down minimum, which means you have to have 3 colors on your model, whether it be blue, black, and gray, or black, white, and green. It doesn't matter so long as you have 3 colors. That's not really that hard to do. It's really designed to deter people from base coating black, top coating with something else, and calling it a day. You can't just simply base coat your models. So really we're going for at least 3 colors, which in this case we're going to do more than 3. Additionally, for speed painting, we're only going to work in terms of 2 layers. Now, the best painters out there will tell you that the more layers you apply, the better the miniature, the richer the colors, and the more naturally they quite literally layer on top of each other. The upper colors will gain a different clarity from the lower colors. There'll be a richness to the color, and that's absolutely true. But for purposes of our project, we're actually trying to get through this a lot quicker. So we're only going to work in terms of 2 layers. We're going to work in terms of the base coat layer and then maybe 1 top coat layer. The base coat layer can basically be thought of as your basic color. It's not going to be your final color, but it might be your final color for some of the areas. For example, if I was going to paint my Marines black, I may start with a Chaos Black undercoat, and then I may go with a slightly lighter black as my base color. It'll sort of offset it a little bit so it doesn't have that sort of black unanimous feel to it that doesn't really show any detail, because we want to show some of the details on the model. In this case, we're going to go with the Chaos Black undercoat as just a basic priming coat. On top of that, we're going to layer the creamish bone color for the base color, and then we're going to apply other colors on top of that. But the base color is going to pretty much stay our primary color for the model. We're going to use washes and highlights as well as some lining and trim work to sort of set the model apart. But once we spray that basic foundation color down, that's going to pretty much be the end result of the model. By spraying it in a can or spraying it with a Citadel spray gun, it cuts out a lot of time, and it's just that simple 1 color we're going to stick with. So be sure it's the color you want for your model, because you're going to be seeing a lot of it. Normally when I do a model, if I'm going to paint it, most of the time I'll go ahead and apply any sort of gravel or grit to the model now on the base. You can see here all these gaps on this particular miniature where there's plenty of room for You can see here on this particular miniature that there's plenty of gaps here on the base beneath this slating where there's room for rocks or flock or that sort of thing.
Most miniature painters will recommend you go ahead and apply your rocks now, or your gravel or grit mixture. Go ahead and apply that at this point and then paint over that so you can dry brush it. While I agree with that in a general sense, for speed painting, that's not really what you want to do. For speed painting, you really want to apply your grit or your textures later, because that extra little bit of time where you have to get all of those rocks painted is going to slow down the entire process, especially after painting 40 or 50 models. By simply leaving the large pieces here like the slate, which is easy to paint and easy to dry brush, and then adding in the grit and textures later, we'll cut out quite a bit of time for our model. We're just going to be throwing a little static grass on top of that anyway, so that's going to create all the definition and texture that we need. And certainly from a table view, it's not going to really matter that much. When you're standing this far away as you're an opponent and you're watching your models, you're looking at your models across the table, you can't see all that fine detail work. So really just stick for something that pops. Stick with something that's going to look good across the table, and don't worry about the fine detail work too much. Okay, so we've got them all primed up and ready, and we went ahead and applied the base coat to them. And we used the Army Painter spray for this. This is the bone color, so it's going to be kind of a cream look. And then once we apply the washes later on, it'll darken it up a little bit. So this is what they look like all based up. Now this is just with the coat of black, and then just with the Army Painter bone color. So this is sort of a creamish color. The other important thing to remember is when you use these sorts of spray paints like this, which are not traditional spray paints, you need to be sure to have some sort of color on hand to match, so that when there's mistakes made, and when your paints overlap, you'll have something to be able to do the touch-ups with. Now, Army Painter does make their own sort of paints and bottles, so if you have that available, that's actually perfect because the colors match exactly. If you don't, then you just need to find something similar. I found a swatch paint in my group of paints that was close, and I did a little test on the bottom just to see how close it looked. And you can see here that it's pretty close, but it's not exactly. So ideally, you should have the exact same color. Just be sure to have that on hand. If you don't have that on hand immediately, you can always go back and do your touch-ups later in order to paint in the meantime. So this is them ready to go, so I'm going to go ahead and start our first session, and once we have the end of the first 30 minutes, we'll show you the results. Okay guys, here we are at the end of the first painting session, the end of the first 30-minute session. I'm going to show you our results so far. This is about where we stand. As you can see, the 5 Terminators have been roughly based in. I've based in the colors on their bases. I've added some gray and some blue. This darkish bluish color is a greenish gray, and that's going to eventually be used to go up to an icy blue. I haven't done anything else on the basic guy so far, just base work. And on this guy, I was able to get a lot of his shields put in with 10 bits, and that's going to eventually go up to a lighter shade of bronze, I think. So that's basically it. That's 30 minutes worth of work, not a lot, and we're moving on to the second 30-minute session. As you can see, this is going to start to add up, so there's the first 30-minute session. Here at the end of the second session, I wanted to show you our progress on these Space Wolves, these Frost Giant Space Marines. So here you see at the end of the second session, not a lot done, really. Again, we're just building slowly at a time. We're about an hour into the project at this point, because we're only at the end of the second 30-minute session. We finished applying our brass colors, or our 10 bits, rather, that will eventually be brass. And we also added some of this Graveyard Earth color to the shoulder pads and knee pads. Did that across the board. And on the tank, finished up applying 10 bits to a lot of different areas, like here on the back of the Flame Storms, here on the back of these, so touched up the shields a little bit, and I went ahead and applied black to the treads, so blacked those. Now you can see I've got some splatter here. That's okay, because again, we're going for speed, and we're going to cover that up with some snow, some mud, some slush, and we're going to touch it all up so it'll look beautiful when it's done. Starting to see the colors come together. I'm starting to like the way it's looking. So far so good, and on to third session. Okay, end of the third session. We're 90 minutes into the project at this point. So with this session, I added some brown over here to these horns, started to give them a little detail, just a little color really. Splashed a little silver paint on this guy, on the smoke launchers, and on the venting here in the back, and did the shoulder pads on this guy, plus the barrel on this Hurricane multi-melted that I forgot about. On these guys, I did the bolt gun metal on their claws, and I touched up the Graveyard Earth on their shoulder pads and knee pads just to make sure it all came out, nice and even. That's basically it in that session. Not a lot, really, but we're doing this in small bumps, 30 minutes at a time. We're 90 minutes into the project. at this point to what will ultimately be about an 11-hour project. So not bad. Looking pretty good, pretty pleased, and I'll give you an update at the bottom of the next quarter or next 30 minutes.